Hello and welcome to the Hamblin Vision, to our YouTube channel. My name's Mike Jenkins and I am the events manager for the Hamblin Vision. And joining me today is Jane Metcalfe. Jane Metcalfe is an author who is going to be giving a talk for the Hamblin Vision at the Green Door Centre on Friday the 3rd of November. Jane's going to be at the centre from 3 p.m. till 5 p.m. and she's joining us to talk to us about her book, Things in Heaven and Earth. The subtitle is A True Story of Love, Mystery and Transformation. And I'm thrilled and delighted to welcome Jane to this Zoom meeting with me here today. So hello, Jane.
Hello, Mike, and thanks for inviting me. I'm pleased to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to talk to you. Jane and I have known each other for a number of years, actually. We've been on spiritual retreats together. We even, for a number of years together, collaborating, managed events for a spiritual teacher here in the UK. And Jane's done that so many times for different teachers and been involved in lots of different events in Ireland and in this country. So we have a long association in this field of spiritual inquiry, spiritual practice. And I'm really pleased that Jane is coming to talk to us about her book because it's quite unique. So the title is Things in Heaven and Earth, and some of you may recognize that as a quote from the play Hamlet. And it is indeed a quote from the play Hamlet. But the context of this story is truly fascinating, and I don't think I've come across a story like this before. And when I say a story, as the subtitle explains, it's a true story. So I'm just going to read a little bit about the introduction for our event that we're having. Jane's going to be coming to us to talk about the book, but also to take questions and to explore this incredible transformation that happened between two complete strangers. So, listeners and Jane, bear with me while I just read this little bit of introduction to the event and to the book. When cinema legend Lauren Bacall met reclusive British playwright Colin Haydn Evans at a Los Angeles dinner party in 1979, their lives were instantly and utterly transformed. This true story, until now a closely guarded secret, describes how they fell irresistibly in love. But their unlikely relationship had much more to it than that. From that first explosive encounter, strange and unprecedented events unfolded that challenged the meaning of normal. Quoting directly from the couple's diaries, intimate letters and interviews of the time, Things in Heaven and Earth painstakingly and exclusively unveils the course of their 5-month affair and the deep bond that lasted their entire lives. This book describes a unique adventure through the portal of time, seen through the eyes of Bacall and Evans, and it's a drama that is both spiritual and deeply human. So, wow, Jane, I mean, it's such an incredible story, isn't it?
It is. It's hearing you read that again. The first thought that comes into my head is, I cannot believe that it happened, but I know it did.
Yeah.
It's so strange. Yeah.
It's so strange. And so I first heard about this manuscript that you were working on a few years now, and we've talked about it a lot over the years. So I thought it might be interesting for those people listening and those people who might be thinking about coming along to the event, or indeed, of course, buying the book, to just talk a little bit about how this all began. I mean, it's extraordinary that there was this meeting, from what I understand, this meeting between this British playwright, Colin Haydn Evans, and Lauren Bacall. They met in Los Angeles in 1979. And the moment they met, this staggering recognition happened. And through our conversations over the years, Jane, and certainly through reading the book, it's always struck me that something within the both of them recognized itself. So, in our world with studies in consciousness, and certainly at the Hamblin Vision, I mean, Henry Hamblin himself had many, many mystical experiences and paranormal experiences. And all of his writings point towards this recognition of the presence of God within us, or Christ consciousness, or just this awareness that there is something here that's not uniquely just us, that it's a universal sense of just life, a pure open consciousness that we all share. And I always remember when I first read the beginnings of this story, this book that you were putting together, that it seemed that within each other they met in this hallway, and then it was like the consciousness in each of them recognized itself, and then after that this incredible series of events unfolded, and this deep bond between them which never went away. So if I ask you, Jane, how did you come to be involved in this incredible story?
Yes, I want to kind of take you up on a couple of things you said, but I'll go to that first. I became involved with it because Colin Haydn Evans was my very, very early marriage. I got married when I was 17 to him, and he was older. And it didn't last, and we parted and went our separate ways. And somehow I came back into contact with him in the early 2000s, which quite some time after I'd last heard from him. I discovered that he'd been a radio playwright for a long time, and indeed I had had a career as an opera singer. So we'd both, in a way, followed the dreams that we had. But I went to stay with him in Wales, and he was married for the third time to his current wife. And during the course of our chats, he said to me that he thought I might be the right person to document something. And he was rather mysterious about it. And then he told me a little bit about the story in a very cautious way. Colin had a manner of throwing things as if they were not very important away. So he can tell you something that was unbelievably important and you wouldn't think it. But he had indeed met her. And at that time, when he first told me, I was not allowed to know who the actress was because she was quite famous and it was kept under wraps. But they had indeed had this meeting, as Mike has already read the little bit about the introduction to the book. And it was indeed out of the ordinary. And I've wanted to try to fit it into many categories over the years. I suppose paranormal is one, but out of the ordinary, even in terms of spirituality, I would say, listening to what you were saying, Mike, I was thinking neither of them ever talked in terms of God or spirituality or consciousness. You always get a pure version of what happened, so that in a sense you can lay what you might feel on it on top of it. And I hadn't really thought about that before, but it is important because we often get caught up in referring to things that we think we understand. And sometimes there are some things, and many things indeed, that we don't understand at all. And we try and make ourselves believe we do. So, um, interestingly, um, so when going back to when I met Colin, and he said that I might be the right person to edit and help publish some documents that were held, and he gave me the briefest of throwaway chats about it, and then eventually I heard from it was Lauren Bacall's, actually he had clairvoyant, which also sounds very odd, but I imagine perhaps top stars often have their own pet clairvoyants. And she got back to me and said, yes, you are the right person for this. So there was something spooky about that, that I just turned up at the right time to take on this job. At the time, obviously, Lauren Bacall was still alive, and obviously both she and Colin now are no longer alive. So, but during that period, I was sent quite a substantial amount of documentation, including diaries and interviews um, with with Lauren Bacall and with Colin, interviewed by Naomi and also Lauren Bacall's son.
And
And
Naomi, just for the listeners, Naomi was the psychic medium that
yes,
she,
thank you.
the clairvoyant, yeah.
Thanks, Mike. It is quite a complex story, so I'll try and cut this short because
No,
I
it's
want to.
good. It's fascinating.
I want to leave anyone who is listening to this and feels they might come with the thought that there is something really exciting to hear, and I don't want to tell you it all now. But basically, she said yes. You are the right person, and something's going to happen. And Lauren Bacall has always kept it quiet, but it will come out into the public. And she said, and I will come and meet you. And then she promptly died about after sending me quite a large amount of documentation. I mean, probably about 50,000 words worth of material. And she
I'm
died.
sorry to interrupt, but weren't there also letters in there as well between?
Yes. There was only one letter, actually, one letter, but extremely important one. But she was promising more, and then what happened is she told me, and Colin told me, that the what he called the powers that be, who were probably Lauren Bacall's minders, if you want, or as probably anyone famous has, they clamped down on it all, and couldn't I couldn't get nobody would respond to me, and then Colin himself went very much into his shell, and quite not long after, well, actually, sorry, before Lauren Bacall died, he died in 2009, and I think she followed in 2013. So between the period after Naomi had died and then followed by Colin, I tried very hard to find out who she was, or or have validation of it, because during my last visit to Colin, although he'd kept it under wraps who she was, I'm quite good at detecting, and I did a bit of detective work, and through certain things said in the documents, it couldn't have been anyone else. So I did say to him, "Is this? I think it's Lauren Bacall," and he he had to admit it, but he didn't want me to tell anybody. But obviously, since they both died, I decided I would actually go ahead and just publish what I had got, and to present it with a backstory of a lot of the interesting things that happened between Colin and myself when we were married, because there was always a spiritual path or an element of the psychism around my knowing of Colin, and
Yes.
which I think then drew us back together again for this event. So there really, really are more things in heaven and earth than we have ever dreamt of. And that is the point I always feel with the Hamlet quote, that we try very hard to understand, but sometimes we simply don't have the the wherewithal, the language. And interestingly, Colin and I were very keen on Krishnamurti at the time we were together, and I've been quite interestingly reading a lot about Krishnamurti. And the one thing he did, which Colin was very similar to, he refused to be to call. He refused to um, make it fancy. He wanted to try and wake people up and make them aware of other without all the names. And I thought, I now see, and you won't have heard me say this before, Mike. It's really, I've realized that they come from the same kind of stable. They were both extremely present and conscious and awake. And I'm talking of Krishnamurti and obviously Colin. And then going back to him meeting Lauren Bacall, they obviously, in a sense, sparked each other to a further awakening that I don't think ever left them, but neither of them were interested in giving it names or doing anything with it. But yeah, and I find that very, very important, because sometimes we try and go off on ideas of what things are. We don't really know, but actually the main thing is if it informs your life and creates to have what I call an awake and aware life, doesn't need a definition. I think that's what I'm saying. So but in the book, you can, and the diaries that they wrote, they kept a diary, and there are excerpts from these diaries that I had that are stunning. And try as I might, I have never really understood exactly. I can't really comprehend what was going on for them, but it is absolutely fascinating in its own way. I'm just always very sorry that they both died, and we don't know the full story, but The mystery is there, and the truth of it is there in the writings and the interviews. So I've talked a lot, Mike. So
Well, it's lovely. It's really, really nice, Jane. And as you say, there's some perspectives there that you've just shared that we've not spoken about before.
no,
And I
absolutely.
think they're really valuable to people. What does strike me from reading the book, and certainly from reading those diary entries. So just to be clear for the listeners, I think I'm right in saying, Jane, that there are extracts from Lauren Bacall's diary entries and also extracts from Colin's
Yes.
diary entries where they're sort of reflecting on what's happened, or they're just writing about it, in the moment. And so much of the way they express themselves seemed so familiar to me from the writings. Well, actually, certainly of somebody like Henry Hamlin, some of his writings and the way he describes, awakened living. There's similarities between that. There are similarities in those diary extracts with the way that Krishnamurti expressed his experience. Also, many modern non-duality teachers that certainly you and I, Jane, have spent time with and even hosted over the years. And so that's what I think is universal about this book. And you mentioned, I think really importantly, that when we don't lay these names and labels, and we don't make any sort of conclusions about what this is and what it might mean, in a way, we ourselves as readers and as human beings having an experience of being alive, we can eventually just come to our own lived experience of that, and that the fruit of it is in how we ourselves live and operate, and how we're changed. And I think that's what the book offers, really, but
Yes.
in a context that is different, is interesting, and also, like, I'm sure we've all had those moments when we have people in our lives who don't at all have any outward interest in spiritual development. They don't read spiritual books. They're not religious. They may not even necessarily have any obvious interest in personal development, but something about them seems settled. They're themselves. And and I think that's interesting to look at in this book. We all know, through the media of film stars or pop stars or writers or whatever, and perhaps many of us just assume they're doing their thing, and they're obsessed by fame and fortune and image and self-image or whatever. So I think it's also interesting from that point of view that somebody in such a position of global fame, I mean, for that generation who watched all of those films with her and Humphrey Bogart, I mean, she really was a massive star.
Yes, I just want to interrupt here because interestingly, I mean, Colin was considerably younger than her when they met. And obviously the age barrier was nothing. I mean, I think he was 38, 39, and she was probably 56 or so. But that didn't make the slightest bit of difference. It was nothing to do with that particular, there was an attraction, but that attraction was out of time, I feel.
But it's fascinating, and it's a great book, and I'm really glad that you're going to be coming to the Green Door Centre in Bosham on Friday the 3rd of November to talk to us about it. And
Yes.
so if anybody's listening, so I'll be sharing this on our YouTube channel at the Hamblin Vision, and also we'll send it out to our mailing list. But if anyone happens to be listening to this and you're in the area, please do feel free to drop along and listen to Jane. There'll be refreshments, teas, coffees, halfway through. It's always a nice gathering. We'll be there from 3 p.m. until 5 p.m. on Friday, the 3rd of November. It's at Bosham at the Green Door Centre on the main road. That's in very near Chichester in West Sussex. You'll get a chance to meet Jane and hear about the book and the story, and to talk to others as well.
And also, Mike, I just want to, before you end, is that I will be bringing copies of the book if anybody wants to buy it at a slightly cheaper price than online.
Which is always good. We like a bargain, which would be great. So yes, indeed, if you'd like to come along, please do. But if you can't make it to Bosom on the 3rd of November, then please do visit our website, thehamblinvision.org.uk. You can read about the event, but also please just look the book up. You know, it's a fascinating story, and it's a very deep and rich piece of writing, a very deep and rich document, really, that you know actually has survived against all the odds and has come through, just as was it Naomi, the name of the clairvoyant, just as she
Yes.
predicted it would eventually reach the public and have its own life. So I think that's fantastic. So if you'd like to learn more about Jane and her writing, you can visit janemetcalfe.co.uk. Jane has a fascinating career to talk about on her website as well, but also Jane's a writer in her own right, and has written some fantastic blog posts, and of course there's the link there to the book. It's available, of course, on Amazon, and I'm sure if you would like to have one of those more affordable copies from Jane, feel
And
free
signed.
to write.
And signed. Yeah.
And signed, indeed. Yes, indeed. And signed. Feel free to contact Jane through her website. Again, the address for that website is www.janemetcalfe.co.uk. Jane, I can't wait to see you on Friday. It's going to be so nice. We'll have a lovely afternoon.
It'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah,
So
me
thanks.
too.
Thanks so much for joining me today, and have a good week, and I'll see you a week today.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Thanks so much, Jane. Bye-bye.
Bye.